I especially like reading translated literature. Literature. What is literature, Smriti? Oh God. Hello, and welcome to a new video. My name is Smriti, and I like to read books, as you may have noticed. I also, in particular, like to read books from all over the world. And this year, I read 34 translated books, out of which I read from 19 different countries and 16 different languages. So I'm here today to talk to you about some of my favorite books from this year in which were translated. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you my top five, which are my absolute favorites that is forever top tier amazingness. And I'm also going to talk to you about my honorable mentions, which were also top tier amazing, but I don't think are going to fit into my all-time favorites ever, if that makes any sense to you. So let's begin, because I have recorded this twice now. First time without sound. So my first honorable mention has to be The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante, translated by Anne Goldstein. Of course, this is a book that I don't think needs much of an introduction because it is by Elena Ferrante, who is world-renowned, but also this was made into a movie starring Olivia Colman, who is one of my favorite people ever, as well as directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it had Dakota Johnson in it and all of that sort of stuff. But essentially it follows this old-ish professor lady who goes to holiday in this beachside town in Italy, and then she meets this family there, and she has this weird obsession with a young mother, and weird things happen, and these characters are not likable under any circumstance, but they are still so compelling, and that is the magic of Elena Ferrante. She writes beautifully, and I need to read more from her. So there we go. Next we have this book, which is Father Maybe an Elephant and Mother Only a Small Basket Bird. And this is one of the weirdest titles ever, but this is by Gogu Shamala, and translated from Telugu from various different translators who are weirdly not named in this book, which is weird, but name the translator always. I will try to do that, but unfortunately not for this book. But essentially this is a book of short stories of Dalit people, and it is beautifully written, and it tells these really weird stories. The thing with short story collections usually happens is that you don't end up liking all of the stories, but in this one I liked all of them. I thought they were very well written. There was this weird magic to her writing, and I thought that it was very hypnotic and something that I hadn't really read before. So I was very pleased with these stories, and I thought they were really interesting. I think maybe there was one story I didn't like, but that was about it. So yeah, I gave this I think a 4.5 stars, so would recommend highly, and there we have it. Next, we have a book that I own, but I don't know where it is, and that is The Hen That Dreamed That She Could Fly by Sun Mi Wang, translated by Chi Young Kim. And this was a book about a hen who dreams that she can fly the coop and become a mum to a chick, because she's always wanted to do that, and hasn't been able to because her eggs always get taken away from her. And this is told in this fable, children's fable sort of way. It has really cute illustrations as well, and I don't know, this book was really good. I thought that the idea of this was basically about motherhood and grit and determination and wanting to be your own person, and just the struggles that a person goes through, and it's a really sad book. So that's why I don't know if I would recommend this for children per se, but I think adults should definitely read this, and you as an adult watching this probably should read it as well. It's really sweet and really sad, but overall a good book. My next honorable mention has to be How to Order the Universe by Maria Jose Farada, translated by Elizabeth Pryor. And this is a book translated from Spanish and from Chile, which is not a country that I read from a lot. So I was really intrigued to find this book and read it. And this is basically about this young girl who travels with her father, who is a traveling salesman, and she accompanies him on some of these trips, and it talks to you about their relationship, but also about her relationship with other people, as well as his relationship with other people and what she observes of it. She also talks about other people around her and what happened in people's lives after the regime of Pinochet. So this tells you very briefly about that time, and how people are essentially reacting to it, and just like the PTSD that people might have, etc. And I thought that this book was really well done. I feel like just the relationships that you see between people was just so beautifully illustrated in this book, and I don't see too many people reading this, so I want to shove it down everyone's throat. So yeah, this is a book that I think you should read because it was quite lovely. Another book that I definitely want to shove down people's throat is How I Hid My Caste by Babura Bagul, translated by Jerry Pinto from Marathi to English. And this is a book which, if I didn't have this weird thing in my head that I'm going to have like a top five, then this would be my sixth in that list, because this book was just so amazing in the way that it was written. It's again a book of short stories about Dalit lives, and it was just the most beautifully written book. Like, just the way that Babura Bagul wrote like the atmosphere and described things to you, it just was so evocative, and like it felt like a movie flashing in front of my eyes. I was just so entranced by the way that he wrote these scenes and made describe them to you, but also describe the people. It was just very, very well written, and very well translated as well, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book and would highly recommend. And yeah, that's it for my honorable mention, so let's just get into my top five. In fifth place, we have Magma by Thora. I'm always petrified that I'm going to butcher her name, so I'm just going to keep the book here. And it is translated by Meg Matic, and this is an Icelandic book that I actually listened to on Scribd, and I thought that this book was something. It really was. Basically, the story is of this young girl who gets into a relationship with a man, and we get to hear her describe it, but we slowly see how it's a very abusive relationship and how she's still like convincing herself to like stay in the relationship, etc. And it is just a book that is so real. Like, the way that it was described to you, it was just so real. I had such visceral reactions to the book where I was listening to it and I was just like, leave him, leave him. Like, I just wanted to shout through like the book. But all of these things were just so true to like reality, and I know so many people who have been through this and haven't been able to like get themselves out of this terrible like relationship that like basically sucks your soul. But I don't know, it was so good in like illustrating this whole thing. So obviously there are trigger warnings for like an abusive relationship and a bunch of other things, so if you are a person who would have an issue with reading such a topic, then like, yeah, don't recommend that. But overall, I thought that this book was really well done. It's really short as well, but like it just made me feel so much that I had to include this in my top five. So yeah, there we go. Magma. In fourth place, I have this ginormous book that I have been so, I don't know, scared to read, but I'm so glad that I did now that I'm done with it, and that is Secondhand Time by Svetlana Alexievich, translated by Bella Sayevich, I think, yeah. And this is a chunky book, which is a non-fiction that talks about the time from before the fall of the Soviet Union to during that fall, and then like right after. So it spans about 20 plus years. And Svetlana Alexievich essentially went and interviewed a bunch of people, so many people during this time, and this is essentially transcripts of those conversations. So you get to hear from people who were hardcore communists, people who hated the communists, people who were part of the regime, people who were affected by the regime, Jewish people, people from Tajikistan, people from Belarus, people from all over, and just see how they were all affected by this fall. We get to see people who participated in various like protests and what they thought of it, and it's just so telling in terms of like our current day as well, where we get to see like people who were really like into the protest, but there were some people who were just like, everyone is protesting, so I decided to go for the protest as well. And yeah, it's just like really interesting to like hear these conversations. And of course, this book is not easy to read under any circumstance, because just the amount of things and terrible things that have happened to people is a lot. There were a lot of times where I had to just keep the book down because I couldn't deal with the horrors of it. But this is reality. This truly did happen to people. And I got to know so much more about like a country and a subcontinent of sorts, that I hadn't quite known before. Of course, I think the one thing which is a detractor for this book, for me, was that I had to do the research myself. So I didn't quite know much about Russia and the Soviet Union, so I had to do that myself, because even though there is like a little thing in the beginning that gives you like a timeline, I still didn't have too much of context, so it doesn't really give you too much of context which you have to get on your own. But like I got that, and then thoroughly, I can't say enjoyed this, but yeah, I thought that this book was an amazing piece of work, and yeah, that's why it's my number 4. My number 3 is a book that I haven't really heard anyone talk about, really, apart from maybe a few people on Bookstagram. And I really want more people to read this book, because this was just such a masterclass in screwed up mother-daughter relationships. And if that's something that like you enjoy, then well, this is for you. And this is Boat Number 5 by Monika Kompanikova, and it is translated from Slovakian by Janet Livingstone. And this book was a wild ride. Essentially, we are following this 12-year-old named Jarka, who is basically on her own because her mom is doing her own thing, is never really around, and her grandmother is like dying or already dead. And yeah, we basically get to see how she like basically deals with her life and what she does with her free time after school and all of that sort of stuff. And essentially she goes to this one garden and she sits there, but one day she finds these twins, and then she decides to take them for herself. And you get to see why exactly that happened, and we also get to see her many years later dealing with the repercussions of what happened during that time. And this book is just twisted, like just like the idea of that itself, if that intrigues you. Yep. I thought that this book was just really twisted, as I have said, very well written, and just like had me at the palm of its hands. Like I was just like eating it up and wanting to know what happened. I loved the way that like these horrific things were described, but not in like a way that is like jarring. But it was just like a fact of life, and this is just how people are sometimes. And I just really like reading fucked up relationships between people. So this had all of it, and I enjoyed myself, and I really want more people to read it. So it's my number 3, but also it deserves to be in the number 3 spot. Yeah, Boat Number 5. Okay, we're in the top 2, and the number 2 spot has to go to Shoko Smile by Choi Un-young, translated by Sung Ryu. This book was amazing. This is again a collection of short stories from South Korea, and it does an amazing job of giving you these very personable accounts of people, and all the things that they are sort of dealing with, be it grief, be it like loss, be it like moving, or like just like identity, etc. But also told with like social context, so like bunch of things that happen in South Korea that I wasn't really aware of, and it through these stories gave you some context of that as well, and really shined a light on the things that happened during that time. And it was just so well done, I thought. The writing was absolutely sublime. I compared it to Jhumpa Lahiri, and I don't think I'm going to take that back, because I think that it is really, really good. It just made me feel a lot. There were stories in this where I positively sobbed, which is a great thing for me, by the way. I love crying. So yeah, it's just like it was such a good read, and there were various stories in this that I still think about, even though I read this I think in Jan of last year. So would highly recommend this. I cannot wait for more books by Choi Un-young. I think she is a very talented young writer, and I'm jealous of her, but also want to read more from her and be her friend. So yeah, Shoko Smile, definitely recommend. Alright, my favorite translated book of this year, I don't think is a surprise for anyone who has probably watched me for a while, and that is Elena Knows by Claudia Pinero, translated by Francis Riddle. Right. This book broke me. It truly broke me. Essentially, we are following Elena, who is a old lady who's dealing with Parkinson's late stage, and we see her deal with that, and we really see her deal with that because this book is told from her perspective over a period of 1 day only, 1 day. So we really like live with her during this period of time, and the way that Claudia Pinero wrote this was just, it broke me. It broke me. Just to see all the things that a person dealing with Parkinson's has to like sort of deal with. But over and above this, Elena is also mourning the loss of her daughter, who passed away, and people think that it was death by suicide, but Elena knows that it was not, that she knows that her daughter could have not done such a thing, and she is trying to make a journey to go find someone else who she thinks will help her in this thing of her trying to find out what actually happened. And this book was just a lot. It talks about people and their relationships, and not everyone in this book is lovable or nice or amazing, but they have like different shades to them, and that's just like being human. You don't have a person who is 100% good and 100% bad, and there are shades to things and there's shades to people, and this book showed all of that and was just so amazingly written. Like the way that you truly felt like you were in Elena's like body and were feeling all of the things and could see the things that she was seeing and like experiencing the things that she was experiencing was so real and amazing and heart-wrenching and terrible. I have not been able to speak about this book and not cry. So I'm gonna stop talking about this book right now, but implore you to read this book. I actually would not, because it's very hard to read. It's a very short book, actually, about like 150-ish pages max, I think. But if you know someone who has dealt with issues such as suicide or Parkinson's, stay away, maybe, is what I would say, and get into it later after you think you can be in a good enough space where you can deal with such topics. But this book was just absolutely amazing and is my favorite translated book of this year. So yeah, that's all that I have for you in this video. I will be coming up with another video of my regular books written in English that I read, and that's coming to you very soon. I'm so sorry about the delays, but if you can, in the comments, tell me about some of your favorite translated books of the year, or just in general. I love recommendations from people, and I would love to read what your recommendations are and see whether like I want to read them, or like let's talk about books, yeah, etc. That I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Okay, I'm gonna stop now, and I will see you in my next video, which is coming to you very soon, I promise.